All right, let's talk about mentoring others. For our lives to have meaning, they have to be about more than us. A good verse to illustrate this is 1 John 3:16-18, which we're going to read in a minute. In Titus, it says, older men teach younger men. We have lost this. It's gone. It doesn't exist. I think it started when we changed sharing the gospel to invite people to church. Right? But seriously, how many of you don't need to raise your hands, but have you ever had somebody walk up to you and say, I want to invite you into a mentoring relationship? There's a guy that works for me. He's adopted twice. So he got adopted. Those parents did some bad things, lost custody of him, gets adopted again. That brings some psychological trauma to adulthood. He's in his early 30s. So this pains me, but he's much younger than me. And I said to him, hey, listen, I want to invite you to consider, let's get breakfast sometime. This has nothing to do with your employment. But if you want to talk about what would it look like to enter into a mentoring relationship, I'd love to talk to you about that. It's something I'm very passionate about. And we didn't say anything. So 3 days later, I'm like, hey, just wanted to check in with you. He's like, I'm still thinking about it. Which is usually code for no. He looked at me like I was nuts, which is a common response that I get. Right? I don't know what it's like in Nebraska, but in Michigan, all of the hunters are constantly lamenting how younger people are not getting into hunting. In part because they're always on their devices. It's their device. It's the device's fault. That's hogwash. So, you know what I run into all the time? Guys in their 30s who are like, man, I want to get into hunting. Like the one guy, where's Caleb? Did Caleb leave? Oh, the guy that Caleb reminds me of. There he is. The guy that Caleb reminds me of, he says to me, yeah, I've got this hunting blind at my house, and I was all excited because I shot a deer with my bow, but I didn't get it back. I'm like, well, how long did you sit? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, how long did you wait to get down to go get it? He's like, well, I shot it and I went to go get it. Which if you bow hunt, you know that isn't how it works. I was like, where'd you learn to hunt? He's like, oh, no, I'm just teaching myself. Cool. Hey, would you like to just kind of hang out and we'll talk about hunting and how maybe you can get better at it? Now, you know what's really interesting? We're on year 3. So I start out, he hunts at his property, I hunt at mine. Because I want to learn about scent control, what he thinks about scent control before I let him anywhere near my property. But that's how we start out. And we literally just talk hunting. What kind of bow do you use? How do you keep it going? What kind of weapon do you use? It turns out he doesn't have a weapon, a firearm, so I loan him one of mine. We go through basics, shooting. You know, we talked about this year, and we hunted together a lot this year. You know what we talked about the most? He has 2 boys, 6 and 7 and 5. We talked about how do you father boys. We talked about how do you love your wife. We talked about how do you express your faith. That's mentoring. Now here's the thing, I'll be really honest with you. I wrestled with this for a couple years. Because when I hunt, I used to do chew. Copenhagen tastes good. I've given it up. Except for 1 tin a year. When I hunt. I go out with a giant thermos of coffee. I have a Stanley thermos before Stanley went crazy pricey. I sit down, and there's few things that I enjoy more than sitting in utter silence, waiting for the sun to come up or go down 25 feet off the ground. with a cup of coffee and a good dip in my lip. And silence. Silence. Quiet. Do you know what can't be happening if I want silence and quiet? Talking. Well, here's the thing about guys. We do not talk like this. Right? How do we talk? Side to side. So, if I'm going hunting with a guy, he's sitting there and I'm sitting here. You know what he wants to do? Talk. You know what I want to do but I don't want to do? Talk. But if my life is going to have meaning, it has to be about more than me. So we find that balance. So opening day, when his line blew away because he didn't listen to me, I waited till 10:30. Because 10:30 is when I typically take my opening day constitution, if you know what I mean. And I sent him a text. And then we talked. And we talked about things like, man, my wife gets mad at me because she feels like I hunt too much. And I don't even know what those words mean. And I'm like, man, I was there. I think part of the problem we struggle to mentor people is because part of the problem we struggle for older men to teach younger men is because when we get to be older men, we remember most of our mistakes. And we ask ourselves, I don't know what to say to him because I made a lot of mistakes. Because we've developed this expert model in our society. We only take advice from experts, which is terrifyingly scary. Because to be an expert, you have to spend too much time in school, and there are no institutions in this world that take themselves more seriously without actual outcomes than educational institutions. Right? And so when Trevor sits next to me and we talk about, he's like, man, Carrie was mad at me Saturday night because we had to track that deer and she thought I'd be home at 7 and she felt like she was stuck at home with the kids while I was just out having fun. It's like, man, I've been there. You got to have that conversation with your wife on repeat. 2 years ago, I was talking to him and Carrie and we were talking about stuff and I said something that I believe, 3 years ago, I said something that I believed really strongly. And a year later, I was like, nope, that's wrong. And I told them, I was like, hey, you remember that conversation we had? So, like, I've had to change it. Here's what I think now. And he is like, so you hold strong opinions loosely. Yeah. We're in the thick of mentoring. There's another guy that's a few years behind Trevor in the mentoring process, getting into hunting. So he borrows another one of my firearms. I had a whole bunch until the boat accident, and then I lost them all. And so he's like, I'm going to buy one this year, but I won't have time to get it zeroed before. Well, he was like, I'm going to buy it. Literally, he's like, I'm going to buy it on like the 11th or the 14th. Do you think I'll be able to zero it and hunt on the 15th? Well, yeah, maybe, but I have one you can borrow, and we won't mess up the area where you're going to hunt. Because where are you hunting? Well, he's hunting out of his barn. Okay, cool. So have you, like, considered concealment? No? Okay. I'll come over to your house. Let's look at what's going on. So, like, we go over and for an hour, we're just talking about, like, okay, we need to cut down these tree branches. Your dope is bad here. And like, okay, which way do they go in the morning? They're probably going to go the opposite direction at night, and they might not come through here. We go through all this stuff. And all it does is it lays this foundation for we can talk about life. So now we're talking about, hey, he's saying to me, I have a 16-year-old, and I don't know how to navigate that with him. Yeah, man, I remember when my oldest was 16. We overcomplicate this. But because here's part of the problem. If I say I'm going to mentor you, I create accountability for me. Because I'm going to have to live what I'm talking. Right? But it's literally all through Scripture. Mentor other people. Disciple other people. Matthew 28, make disciples. Let's read 1 John.